Hello, strangelings. Welcome back to my parlor. Here in the United States, we have something that has become a billion-dollar industry, possibly billions-dollar industry. And it's been born out of misunderstanding and fad after misunderstanding and fad. Of course, I am talking about the fad diet industry. Now, of course, they don't call themselves the fad diet industry. I don't even know if they call themselves the diet industry. But many of us have started calling them the fad diet industry. Now, I have seen a few psychologists and just general practitioners alike and everything in between actually calling out this industry. Now, what am I talking about with them calling out this industry? I am talking literally about the fad diets, the cut out carb, the cut out protein, the so on and so forth. Now, of course, cutting out gluten, cutting out carbs, all these things are the perfect diet for a very tiny population of the world at large, but even tinier in the United States. So, one thing you might wonder is how in the world that this industry came to be here in the States. Well, you see, back in the 90s, it became pretty routine. Well, actually, I should say, working from the 80s and into the 90s, it became pretty routine for parents to have to work harder and harder and harder and spend more and more and more of their time away from home. Now, of course, children had to be fed, especially if they wanted to continue to encourage high population growth to serve the economy. And we'll have a conversation about that one later. But they needed, of course, they needed parents to be in the home to feed and take care of said children, but they also needed these parents to be at the same time out working. So they decided that the American people would have a compromise. I quoted that because it's not really a compromise. The compromise is between your children's health and safety and your ability to actually feed your children. You see, of course, without working enough to be able to have enough money to feed your children, you can't feed your children. However, by working so much that you don't have time to actually make the meals for your children either have to know how to make meals for themselves or they have to find a way to make a meal. So, the conclusion they came to, the compromise that they decided we all needed, was more factory foods becoming staple foods in American homes. Well, in homes in the United States. I can't tell you if the rest of the countries in the Americas actually did this or not. I assume chances are not as much. Probably a little bit, but not as much. Some of these foods in America, or in the United States, that are staples are foods that are illegal in other countries because of the amount of non-food in them. Because of the amount of non-food we were all being encouraged to feed our children for, 3 to 4 decades? Wait, hold on. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 decades, almost 4. Because of the non-foods, our bodies can't process the same. So, of course, our bodies hold on to some of that non-food product and have nothing it can do with it. In fact, some of them stay in your body and don't even go through the process of going through your intestines. Because of this, we have a lot of stuff in our body that is not negotiable. But because of the fact that so many people were deemed obese, a subject matter I will be tackling in another video because it's frustrating enough dealing with it. Because of that fact, they of course decided to deem this an obesity crisis starting in the mid to late 90s. I believe it was the mid 90s because I remember being in school and I graduated in 98. So ever since the obesity epidemic, of course, people who wanted to make quick cash came out with diets. And it's not that hard to make a fad diet work. Now, here's the tricky part. You see, the fad diets work, but only temporarily. You see, the fad diets, they work on this principle. If you remove, say, carbs from your diet, and you had an oversaturation of carbs, of course your body's going to burn through the carbs it stored to help deal with the protein, because that's what carbs are for in your body, is to help break down the proteins. Now, if you have an oversaturation of carbs in your body, it's going to burn through those carbs and you're going to lose that weight of the extra mass of the extra carbs you were not currently using. Fat cells are just your body's storage. So, of course, it was just clearing out the storage. But the problem with fad diets, and I was working at a Hardee's during the Atkins fad. The Atkins diet was formulated for people with diabetes because of the fact that less carbs means less worry about high sugar. Because what do you think turns into the sugar? So, of course, one, it worked for the people who needed it. Two, it worked for the people whose bodies were currently oversaturated in carbs. But as our carb-conscious customers told me personally, they realized that maybe they needed to stop doing the no-carb diet, as they were chowing down on a burger for the first time of me knowing them with an actual bun on it instead of the lettuce. Now, what they told me is each one of them within the last 3 months, at the period I'm talking to them, actually hit the plateau and stopped losing altogether. And then they were told by their doctor the reason why this diet is not a long-term diet for people who do not have diabetes is because it only works until you have burnt through your oversaturation of carbs. However, if you continue for longer, not only do you plateau, but then you start gaining weight again, so you start falling in that diet one more time, because now you're storing an oversaturation of proteins because you don't have the level of carbs to deal with them at the level you need. Now, according to the doctors I've spoke to on the subject of fad dieting, this is common for every fad diet where we decide that removing something from our diet or from our routine is the key to losing weight. Because when we adjust the balances of our routine/diet, unless we are adjusting the balances to where it should be, naturally and normally, and we are keeping that up on a daily basis, we are only dieting by the body shock principle. For those who've never heard of this idea, and let me just tell you, I don't know if that's the actual phrase for it, but the body shock principle is you shock your body by removing something it views as essential currently, so that it has to burn through its reserves of said essential, and then you, of course, lose the weight or grow the muscle as you expect. However, once that shock wears off, your body re-regulates itself to your new routine. The effect wears down until it wears off. Therefore, suddenly it stops working Most people who go through these fad diets and exercise routines end up losing hope or getting frustrated and trying yet another one. Now, of course, the people who try yet another one, unfortunately, they are putting themselves through more stress. However, they are doing a more effective job at what they are trying to get done. Because as you transfer from the protein-free fad to the carb-free fad to the sugar-free fad to the fat-free fad, you are continuously putting your body in shock mode. One, shock mode is extremely stressful. I personally do not recommend it. Two, shock mode is extremely good for extremely dramatic results quickly. And that is literally all it's good for. Shock is never good for long-term growth or change. And three, there are times when these fad diets ask you to do things that are dangerous for you. One, things like eating cotton balls. Maybe going ahead and soaking that in orange juice so there's some nutritional value, but eating cotton balls to fill your stomach. This does quite a lot of detriment, as cotton is not something humans have evolved to be able to naturally eat. Unfortunately, it binds up our systems. Things like cutting certain things out of your diet. If you are doing it massively right away, you can actually induce enough shock in your body to actually cause damage instead of just the effect you want. And to be quite frank with you, unfortunately, because so many of us don't understand how the human body works, unfortunately, some of that shock can be severely detrimental. We need to be able to balance it correctly. A change in your balances should happen slowly over time, not fast. Because, of course, doing damage to our system is actually not the optimal way to make growth and change. Of course, this also presents itself in other ways, but those will be different videos. But the human body best changes and most healthily changes when the changes are actually slow and deliberate, taking in consideration your current balances and what feels more healthy in your balances. Your current balances, if they're not healthy and you want to get to that more healthy feeling, sorry guys, ever since that case of strep throat when I was 16, my throat dries up and talking becomes very hard. Anyhow, so the idea is to actually take yourself from your current balances if they feel unhealthy and figure out what the healthy balance looks like, then slowly pull that goal out until you reach your healthy point. Because shock is a violent state. Damage is a violent state. And the more you damage or cause that violent state on your body, the less life expectancy that portion of your body actually has. Also, the increased damage increases your likelihood of cancers, as cancers are merely damaged bodily cells. For the most part, there are a multitude of cancers that come from outside sources. However, they are still damaged cells from your body, whether the damage comes from outside sources or you. So, fad and crash diets. I implore you all, abandon the industry. And if you actually work with a company that does fad and crash diets, why? Why? Do your research. Are you sure that's something you want to promote? Do you feel that those things are good to promote into your community? Would you be okay if you were forced to have that fad diet, or your children? Again, if the diet is for health purposes, if it is a specific prescription because of a lack of balance enough that the doctor says you should do this sudden and shocking thing, that's not mine to change. But if you are not getting doctor advice and you are believing the hype that you need to go and get something done to take care of your body because God forbid you actually, look like a real person, I implore you, reconsider. Consider, one, are you getting these advertisements just because they want to make you feel bad? And consider, two, if there's a health issue, you should be seeking a professional. And if you feel your weight is a health issue, have you seen your doctor? And if not, why not? But again, I will get into more on that on my obesity episode once I do get it done. So I'm going to leave this one here for now. I'm going to leave it as it is. As I said, I implore you all, please do not go for fad diets. If you are on one of those diets, I hope it is because you have one of the conditions that require that diet, and not because you believe the hype. Because the hype is only status quo, and we all know what the status quo is for. Alright guys, I'm going to get out of here. Remember, doesn't matter who you are, I love you. Take care of each other, and I'll see you guys in the next video.